Well, good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the Ohio Beef Council's virtual farm tours program. I'm Kimball Parrish for the Ohio Beef Council. Today, we're going to be going out to Mr. Craig Corry's farm. I'll let him tell you where he's from and a little bit more about his operation here in a second. We want to meet you guys first, so we're going to spotlight you on camera, and if your teacher can tell us what class we had there and where you guys are from, that'd be great. So let's start with Minerva.
Hi, I'm Mrs. Nito, and this is Personal Nutrition and Wellness. So it's a foods class, but we learn about nutrition also.
Very good. Well, thank you guys for coming. All right, and let's jump over to Miami Trace. You guys?
I'm Mrs. Arlete, and this is a Principles of Foods class as well. And we are in County, Ohio.
Very cool, very cool. And we may have one more classroom jumping on here a little bit later, so if you hear someone jump in, that's a middle school from Kansas. So actually, a group from Kansas is going to be joining us as well. So without further ado, let's move over to the star of our show, and I should say stars of our show, Mr. Craig Corry and his farm. So Craig, it's a little windy out there today, but you often have to fight the elements with beef farming. So we'll kick it over to you, sir.
All right. Thanks everybody for coming to visit us today. As Campbell said, it is a little windy here, but it's nice. It's better than it was this morning. We might get a little more rain later today, but it's a good day to be a cow on the Corry farm. They're happy. Nice, cool temperatures. All their hair coat is starting to grow up for winter, so they're in really fine shape. I'll give you a little background on our farm operation and where we are. You guys in Minerva, to get to our place from where you are, you would want to get to Interstate 77, head south. When you get to Interstate 70, then you got to go west, come over to about Springfield, and I guess we would be 10 or 12 miles southwest of Springfield in Greene County. You guys over in Miami Trace, you're a lot closer. All you got to do is come up through Cedarville, Jamestown, and get up in that neighborhood, and you're going to be pretty close to us that way. The kids from Kansas, that's a long trip for them. So we'll look forward to hearing from them when they get logged in and get online. This farm has been in my family for 6 generations. Our operation is about 500 acres. We raise corn, soybeans, wheat, hay for the cattle. Of course, we have pasture. Settled in 1830 by my great-great-great-grandfather. And although the original house is no longer standing on this part of the farm, one of the barns that we'll show you here in a little bit was built in the 1830s. We're just lucky that an old structure like that, even though we've had to upgrade and remodel it some, it still serves a purpose in our beef operation today, a shelter for the cow herd in the winter and hay storage. And because of the way it was built, we're just lucky that it's still stood up and has withstood the test of time. We're able to use it today. We have about 35 beef cows in our herd. Some people would call them maybe the mother cows or the brood cows. These are the females that live here pretty much year round, and they will live here for several years. Their job is to have a calf every year. In February, March, or April. They're bred either with artificial insemination or by our bull in the summer, late spring, early summer. And so the gestation on a cow is about 9 months and 9 days. And after that time, then when they have their calf, the cows will raise those calves on the pasture behind us. And we have a few acres of the farm that is not well suited for raising corn and soybeans, the row crops, wheat. So we keep it in grass year round. And we try to use that solar energy where the sunshine, the rain falls, the grass grows, the cows eat the grass. So we use them to harvest that product and that part of the farm. In about 6 or 7 months of age, the calves are weaned because at that time they can probably grow faster and more efficiently by eating feed that we would provide them rather than just living off what little grass they can digest and their mother's milk. That also gives the mothers then a chance to recover recuperate, build up some body fat for the winter, grow out their hair coat, and prepare to repeat that cycle then the next year. We've had some questions about how old cows are. You can tell by a lot of our ear tags, and we use the ear tags just as an identification because we can't tell a lot of them from a distance. We can't tell a lot of them apart, but we can look at them with binoculars if we need to look for a particular animal, for where it is and what it's doing that day. The first digit in this one, let's say this one here is number 51. The one really doesn't mean much, except that was the first calf that we tagged in 2015. So she is going to be 3 years old in next spring. They have their first calf when they're usually 2 years old. And so that female there with the white face has had one calf. She's now pregnant with her second calf that she'll have in next spring. This one here is a 60. It just happens maybe that with the green color, we happen to know she's 10 years older than that. She was born in 2006. So does anybody have any questions that we can answer while we're still looking here close at the mother cows?
Yeah,
Go
guys.
ahead and funnel them through Campbell, and we'll do our best to answer them.
So we got a couple different options. If you guys want to do a quick one, your teacher can enter it into the group chat. And we also, we've got you on video here. So if you want to stand up or wave, we can get you guys unmuted and go from there. So, feel free to chat or wave, and we will get you on going here. So any questions while we're talking here with the mother cows?
Now, while you guys are entering those in, I can tell you that not all cow herds are friendly enough that we can walk out among them and scratch their back. It does happen on this farm that they are around us a lot and we are close to them all the time. But this cow herd is also used. We produce not only commercial cattle to be fed out to market weight, but we have used genetics through artificial insemination and embryo transfer and selection to produce some animals that have been sold to kids in 4-H and FFA, and they've shown them around the state of Ohio at county fairs. We've had some go to state fairs, and actually we've had a couple calves go into Western Canada for an exhibition up there. So some of these females were at one time show heifers, and they're retired now to producing calves on our farm.
Gotcha. So we talked a little bit about like the tags, but we didn't necessarily talk about like how long your average cow lives. So I know it does vary, but kind of walk us through maybe what their lifespan looks like, and maybe why some are hanging around a little bit longer than others.
Yeah, okay. That's a good question. In Ohio, cows get, it's not like the range, maybe the rougher range conditions that we might find in other parts of the United States. Cows get a lot of feed in Ohio. Usually the grass stays green most of the summer. And if you think back this past growing season, when we can get into July and August and our cow pasture is still green and growing, that's really good for us. That saves us a lot of hay. We don't have to scrounge around for other feedstuffs to provide for them, because our goal is to keep them. We don't want to have to sell them because we don't have quite enough feed for them through the winter. So we will do our best to make sure that they're well fed and well cared for, even if the pasture gets a little bit short in the summer. And in the wintertime, when we can supplement, if it's really, really cold, they keep warm by the feed that they eat. So we can increase the calorie intake that they get by giving them some corn. And as they get older, their teeth get worn down. So the better quality feed that we can give them keeps them around for a longer time. On the average here, I think our oldest cow is maybe 14 or 15 years old. So if they have their first calf when they're 2, we can get 10, 11, 12 calves out of them if they remain nice and productive. If their health is good, they get an annual checkup from our veterinarian. We keep pretty close eye on them, and that way that keeps them in their peak performance for a long time.
Sure. It looks like maybe Minerva, you guys have a question? Yeah, we'll go ahead and unmute you. All right. What's your question?
I know I had them write down some questions. One of the questions they asked was, how old does a cow get before you butcher?
Sure. So Craig, let's maybe
Okay.
talk about the average like market when we're feeding cattle to go to market, and then we just talked how wide of a variety of ages you get with your cows when they're raising those calves.
Sure. I guess the average weight of probably most of the cattle that are it takes them about a year and a half or so to reach market weight. A lot of that obviously is dependent upon how good their nutrition is, what they're fed. If they don't get a lot of corn when they are after they're weaned, and if they get a low protein diet, just with if to try to get them to grow on grass, it's going to take them longer to get. They're going to be a lot older by the time they get old or heavy enough to make a good carcass to produce a good carcass that you would find with a premium price in the supermarket or at a restaurant. The average rate of weight gain in a calf, once we'll look at some of the feed and show you what we feed them in a little bit. They may gain 2.5 to 3 pounds per day after they're weaned. So if they start out about 400 pounds to 500 pounds this fall, by next summer they should reach market weight 1,200, 1,400 pounds, something like that.
Good question. Good question. If you guys have more, keep them coming. Waves or type them in, and we'll get them answered. So, Craig, tell us maybe a little bit about what these cows' daily life is like. This is a big abnormality for them to be appearing on camera. We've done a couple tours with them now, so they're getting pretty good at it. But what's a daily routine for a cow look like?
Yeah, we had a question yesterday. Those of you watching, well, the audience yesterday was a little bit younger, and they wanted to know, does a cow sleep standing up? And I guess I answered, I'm not sure whether a cow goes to sleep the same way that you and I do, but at night they will. Generally, they are animals that herd together. Domesticated cattle, they don't scatter all in different locations in the pasture. They will stay as a herd. They move as a herd. They graze as a herd. They eat as a herd. They do almost everything as a group. There are always a couple, maybe other outliers, but at night they'll chill out in one spot of the pasture, find a nice place. They'll kind of get down, lay down. Sometimes they lay clear on their side, and they will spend the nighttime like that. When the sun starts to come up in the morning, they decide that their number one purpose is to eat. You guys, if you're in a food science class, maybe some of you are also in ag education classes at the school. An easy way to remember it is that a cow has 4 stomachs. Now they're not all actually 4 stomachs. Each stomach is not like ours, but it's a complex digestive system that has 4 separate compartments, but it has a lot of capacity. This big red cow right here, there's a huge container inside her that's almost like a barrel, and all the feed that she eats goes into that. It's a big fermentation vat, and then when they get a chance to sit down or stand under a shade tree, they chew their cud. You can see some of them now. They're gonna chew up this hay, and then they'll regurgitate some of that long stemmy hay and re-chew it and then re-swallow it, and it'll pass on through the other 3 parts of their digestive system. So from the time they get up in the morning until the time they chill out at night and decide to relax for the evening, most of their time is going to be digesting the grass that they eat. And that's what makes cattle a little bit unique from some of the other animals that we raise, because you and I have one stomach, a pig has one stomach, your cat, your pet dog, they have one stomach. A horse, you could say, maybe has 2, but that's what makes a cow unique, is that they can live and survive and even thrive and produce food in the form of either a calf or themselves or milk that man can harvest from an area of land that will not produce corn or soybeans or wheat or another grain that they might be able to raise. So the day in the life of these guys, they find a comfortable spot, they digest their food, and when the area of pasture that they're in is short and they start running low on feed, then as a cattle producer, we open up another section of the pasture that they have been protected from and move them into that area so that they've got new fresh feed to eat, and take them off this area so that it can recover and regrow for future use by the herd.
Very good. Let's jump back to Minerva. It looks like they might be typing in a question here. You can unmute you and we can just have you ask.
Okay, what steps do you take to keep the food safe from on your farm until it gets to the market where it's butchered?
Well, number one, we got to keep the cattle in good health, and that means that we do have to vaccinate them, but it's not like if a farmer vaccinates animals, as most of us have been vaccinated for various diseases. That's one thing that has added a great deal to the average lifespan of people in the United States. I think back when some of our ancestors were born, a lot of them didn't even make it to adolescence because of things like diphtheria, mumps, measles, rubella. So the vaccinations of us has added to our lifespan. In the case of our cattle, there are diseases that they can get. So if we give them a shot, it's either to prevent a disease or to treat an illness. And part of that means that we use what's called beef quality assurance. You guys are a food science class. If you look at a chart of the cuts of meat, like the loin on a cow and the round, those long sinewy muscles that are high quality, very few times do we try to find anything in their neck region, and usually the skin is very loose around their neck. And most of the vaccines that we use now are what we call subcutaneous, and it may be as little as 1 or 2 cc's of a product that we just pull up a little skin on their neck, give them an injection. They don't even hardly feel it. They don't even know that it's going on.
Very good. Craig, let's maybe talk about, when a cow gets sick, you do, have to give them a shot. Let's talk about that. And then also the safety measures we have in place with withdrawal times.
Yeah, that's a good point. If just to make sure that there is no antibiotic contamination in our food sources, all medications have what's called a withdrawal time. And that means that from the date that the rancher or the producer would administer that, according to the label on the product, it may say 7 days, it might say 14, it might be 28. So then that means from the date that we would administer that, it's going to be at least that many days before that animal can be sold and put possibly into the food chain. In the case of these cows, they're going to live here for several years, so they have a multi-year life. If they get a booster shot for a particular reproductive disease in particular, they're going to live here for several years, and in most cases like these, it's not even an issue.
Absolutely, farmers take very, very, very seriously the food that ends up on consumers' plates. So not only are they doing things on the farm to prevent diseases and protect our food, but when it does come time for harvest, there's people at those packing plants doing dozens and dozens of different tests and observations to try to make sure that when that beef, whether it's a steak or a hamburger, ends up on your plate, it's super safe. So Craig, we got a message in here in chat, and it's kind of talking about how much does a calf weigh at birth. So let's maybe talk about the whole calving process. When does it happen, and kind of what's that day-to-day look like?
All right, that's a good question too. These guys are most of them are mature. A mature cow that has had 3 or 4 calves. Generally, they have natural mothering instinct. When they start to go in labor, that whole birthing process can be over in just a matter of an hour or 2, maybe. Sometimes as a farmer, as a producer, we hardly notice it. We do check the herd very frequently, and especially if the weather's not good. We have a area where we can get them in shelter. Sometimes they calve at night outside. The weather's nice, and we come out and look at them the next morning, and there's a newborn calf. It's already nursed the mother. The average weight of our calves is probably 75 to 80, 85 pounds. There are some breeds and some cows that can have bigger calves. We really don't like to do that here if we can avoid it. Some of that is influenced by calf weight comes from the bull side. So in our case, we try to select a bull to breed the females that we know is known for calving ease, so that it makes it a lot easier on the mothers. But nonetheless, we have to be there. If a calf is born backwards, she may need help getting it out. There are cases where maybe they can have a leg turned back. Normal presentation would be for their front feet and their hooves to come out of her first, followed by the head, and then on out the rest of its body and the hind feet last. But as I said, things can go wrong in nature, and that's our job to be available to help. Our veterinarian, luckily for us, is only about 3 or 4 miles away, and with a cell phone emergency call, he can be here very quickly. So generally, calving speaking wise, we've had very good luck. Some of the ones we have to watch the closest are the heifers that are having their first calf. They may not understand the whole process or even know what's going on, but we've been able to get along pretty good.
Awesome. So we got a couple more questions, and maybe we can move across and we can go check out the weaned calves. So got a question on how much water do cattle drink?
That's hard to measure. It depends a lot on the temperature. In the wintertime, a cow may not drink much water. We provide water to them, free choice, all day long. When they're out on pasture, they either will have there's a spring-fed tank just below us that has cool, fresh water in it day and night, all year round. It never freezes. In the wintertime, other producers you may have to have an automatic water fed by the well that has a electric heater in it to keep it from freezing. And they will drink, I guess as an average, you might think of a cow at least 5 gallons a day, maybe 10. On a hot day in the summer, they might be up 15 to 20 gallons. Dairy cow that has to give a lot of milk, just think for a minute how much water a big dairy cow would drink. These cows would probably weigh 1,400 pounds, but a lot of dairy cows can be 400 or 500 pounds heavier and bigger than that. And when their job is to produce several gallons of milk a day, they have to drink a lot of water.
That's a good question. So we're getting some questions more on, what do we do with the calves after they're weaned? So maybe let's run across the name here. And you guys have had some good questions about that, so we'll just go over there and we'll show them. So jump out of here on the pasture, and we'll head right across the lane here. Make sure you latch that gate there for him. So we'll come over here, and Craig will kind of tell us about this stage. We'll learn a little bit about the feed, and then we'll answer some of those questions about how many pounds of meat come from one animal and things like that. So, Craig, let's throw these guys some feed and coax them up.
Yeah, we gave them a little bit of feed earlier today, so they're a little bit off schedule, but they will probably eat some if we offer it to them. So there are a dozen calves. There are a dozen calves in this pen, and they have been weaned for a month or two. And average weight now, they're probably close to 500 pounds. So these calves were produced by the mother cow herd across the driveway, and they are being hand fed. We don't have them quite built up to a full feed yet. Remember when I said that a cow has the same as 4 stomachs? that is useful to us in some ways, but in other ways, it's something that we have to manage, because if we took a 5-gallon bucket of feed and dumped it in front of a young calf that doesn't know its limits on how much it can eat and actually digest, that could be very it could be damaging, and could put that calf's life in jeopardy by eating too much feed of a high quality grain or something all at once. They can eat a lot of roughage, but if we start giving them too much grain all at once, it can be harmful to their digestive system. So we bucket feed them, hand feed them. That gives us a chance to look at them and see if they all come up to eat. That means they're all feeling good. If one of them is back away from the pen, ears droopy, its nose is kind of dry and not moist, that's a sign that animal's sick. So we'll have to examine it a little more closely and see if that has a health problem, maybe related to weather. It was cold and wet last few days, a couple days here, so we will watch these calves the next few days to see how they adapt to the cold weather, and continue then on their nutritional plane. We'll raise that as time goes by, and give them good, wholesome feed, keep them in good health.
Very cool. So let's talk briefly. You said about 1.5 years to get to market weight. What is market weight for these guys? And then you got a question about how much actual meat will you get when that animal is brought to harvest.
Okay, say that last part again. I didn't quite hear the last part of that question.
No, you're good. The question is about how much meat do you get off of one animal?
Okay. One thing I wanted to point out too, I'd heard a comment made while we were warming up a little bit too about the cattle don't have any horns, and cattle as a species are naturally horned. But you guys have had enough science in high school classes to know about the old Punnett square with the big P for polled, or the big P for horned and little p for polled. There are cattle breeds that are naturally, you have the recessive gene for being polled, which means no horns, and that is the Angus breed. Well, most of these cattle are black, and they have a lot of Angus bloodline in them, although they are crossbred. They're not purebred. There is one calf here that has a little bit of horn that has grown. Sometimes they just have a scur that is like a horn. It's just attached loosely to their skin. But most of these cattle here have no horns because genetically they don't have the gene to make them grow horns. Now, as far as when they get to market weight, the rule of thumb in cattle would be if you take the weight that it weighs on the hoof, so it's live weight. If that was say 1,000 pounds, the carcass from that animal would be about 61 or 62%. A leaner, more heavily muscled calf might be a little higher than that. A calf that has a lot of dairy bloodline in it behind it, from a dairy cow, their muscle pattern, their skeleton, their frame structure is all different, so they would maybe not have quite as much of a meat carcass as a beef calf. So hopefully that answers that question.
Oh, for sure. Greg, before we maybe talk about the feed, let's go back to the conversation about horns. So why don't you want horns on your cattle?
Well, horns are kind of from a modern producer standpoint, what purpose do they serve? If you go back maybe to ancient times, horns would be used. You guys watched the bulls and steer wrestling things on rodeo. Horns are probably a defense and used as a weapon by the animal back in ancient times, prehistoric times. That was their part of their defense mechanism. Today, if we're going to feed a group of cattle in a setting like this, if one or two of them has a big set of horns sticking out, they're just going to use that to harm. They could cause injury to their pen mates. They could cause harm or injury to me as a producer. And we don't they really don't have a purpose for us to do that. So here in the Midwest and in a lot of the herds that we have in Ohio, horns just are, if a person is a producer of horned cattle, then obviously they'll keep them on. But in our case, that's kind of a management thing. We would prefer that they don't have horns.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So it's more of a safety for cattle and for producers
Yep.
as well. It's a lot.
Yep.
To manage.
It just makes sense. It's easy. They can be removed if they do have them, but it's easier for us just to do it genetically before they're even born.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about what these guys are eating.
All right, you guys have and being in Ohio, you guys know what corn looks like. Drive up and down the roads this time of year, there are ears of corn. I took one ear, and of course the combines that we have that we're out in the fields now, all they do is take these ears of corn. When it goes in the machine, it shells that stuff off there, and there's some corn. On our place, we do have a machine. We will harvest some of the corn in the ear or on the cob, and we grind the kernels and the cob. That makes a nice, coarse, bulky feed for the cattle. They do like that. Corn is used as the energy source. It has a lot of calories. And of course, you guys over Washington Courthouse, I haul corn over to Bloomingburg, just up the road there from you. And in the case of corn, we can feed it whole to the cattle. We can grind it, crack it, roll it a little bit. In the big feedlots out west, they even have a couple places where they will steam it and flake it, almost like corn flakes. And that's just to give the cattle a little better opportunity, a little more efficient digestion through their system. But of course, in Bloomingburg, they'll take that corn and they can extract out some of the sugar and the fructose and turn that into alcohol, which is added into gasoline to make gasoline cleaner burning and more efficient of a fuel. Then they can take some of the byproduct is distiller's grain that's left over from that process. That makes excellent feed for cattle. It's high in protein, a lot of nutrition, pretty economical. So that gives a double use of a product for man and the animals. So there's corn. I've got some soybeans. Most of you have seen soybeans. And soybeans are high in protein. They're a little bit lower in energy, but they're high in protein. And a cow will eat, you can eat raw soybeans. They will process them and digest them okay. But in the case of soybeans, it's usually a little more efficient and useful. We squeeze that soybean really hard, we can get a drop of oil out of it. They can use the oil in printer's ink. We use it for cooking oil. You can add it to diesel fuel, make biodiesel out of it. So after that oil is taken out of it, it kind of becomes a brown looking meal, which then they will add, there's a nice leaf, and they'll add some other vitamins and minerals to it and run it through a pellet maker, so that this is a protein supplement that we will take and add to our corn or ground corn. And it's pelletized because it just helps it mix, keep its uniformity in the feed up a little bit better. And that's about a 40% protein. So it's added maybe 1 part of corn or 10 parts of corn, maybe to a part of protein meal and mix for the ration. And then they also get this stuff that looks kind of like sand, but that's ground up phosphorus and calcium. That's a mineral mix. There's some salt in it. Salt is a necessary, you and I like salt. It's a necessary nutrient for the cows. It regulates their water intake, and most guys that have cattle will let the cattle have free choice access to a mineral mix. Calcium is good for their skeleton, their bones, teeth. Phosphorus helps regulate the body functions and metabolism processes. there's vitamin A and B and other minerals and things mixed in there. So cow's tongue being rough, put this stuff out in a tub under the shade tree where they're going to congregate during the day. They go take 2 or 3 licks of that mix and they're good to go.
Very good. Craig, we got a question about from Minerva. Does the food that cattle eat make a difference in their taste or quality of meat?
Make a difference in their quality of meat?
Yep, taste quality.
In the taste? I don't know that I've seen any studies that that really change that too much, except cattle have, when you guys study your cuts of beef, you'll study something maybe called the quality grades, such as prime, choice, good, and select. Now, those have to do with the amount of fat called marbling that's within the muscle. Not external fat that's along their back or along their outside of their muscle, but marbling within the muscle. And marbling is dependent on a proper amount of energy in their diet. So it would be hard for a calf to get very much marbling if it didn't have very many calories in its growing diet. And in Ohio, that means corn. Out west, that might mean a different grain. Where it's too hot and dry to raise corn out west, they raise sorghum, and maybe they add maybe some wheat. Where cattle are fed, it's their diet is depending on the food that is raised in that area. So you may hear something about grass-fed beef. Grass-fed beef would be very lean. I would say think of it kind of like deer, kind of like venison. If they graze and eat a roughage product all the time, they probably are not going to have the amount of marbling that it would take really to get up in a higher quality carcass grade.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a really good question. So the big popular thing right now is grass finished versus grain finished. There's not anything different between them from a nutritional perspective. The taste difference comes from that intermuscular fat, so that marbling that Craig was talking about. So
yeah, it would be a choice for the consumer, and that's fine. As a producer, I have nothing against anybody that if you want to produce grass-fed beef, that's quite all right.
Yeah, very good. So keep those questions coming, guys. Craig, let's maybe talk about, we've had some questions on, is it just male cows that you thought to be fed to go to market? Is it female? What's that kind of decision, and what's it like?
Okay, here we don't prefer one over the other. We generally cannot determine the sex of the calf. It is possible to do it by some of the technology that's available now, as far as buying maybe semen for artificial insemination. You can determine the sex of the calf that's going to be born. But in our case, we don't do a lot of that. So if the cow has a female calf, if it's genetically superior to some that we have, we will take a look at that female as maybe being one that we might retain for the breeding herd, depending on her pedigree and her bloodline. If it's not one that we want to recycle as a breeding female into the herd, we'll feed the males and the females all together in the feeding pen. At the end, at market time, there probably is a little bit of a premium for the steers. The males may bring maybe a dime or 15 cents a pound more than a heifer, but by and large, a good beef animal is going to be a good price, whether it's a male or a female.
Excellent. All right, so keep those questions coming, guys. We've got about a little under 10 minutes, so we're going to be wrapping up here before long. We want to make sure we get all your questions answered. So, Craig, while those are coming in, maybe let's talk about what you do to protect the environment.
Yeah, I had that question yesterday, and I guess the best way to answer that is, as far as a producer, about everything we do is dependent on taking care of the environment. We've done that for almost 200 years here in the family here, and And my ancestors moved from Pennsylvania after the Revolutionary War, after the War of 1812, and they probably took care of the environment over there. So as far as the cow herd goes, we have grass that grows on parts of the farm that have hills. By having that grass growing there, that keeps the topsoil on that land in place and protects it from erosion. We rotate the cattle so that they don't overgraze, they don't damage the land, and there would be no economic benefit for us not to do so, because if our animals are underfed and not healthy, they're not producing, and it becomes an economic thing. They don't make money if they're unhealthy or if they're not taking care of the environment in which they live. So protecting the water supply. We have a pond on this farm that serves as a water source for the cattle. It serves as emergency fire protection for a large barn. The fire department can draw water from it. We have fish in it, and it's just part of the holistic atmosphere, the environment here on the farm. In the crop operation, we use soil testing to determine the amount of nutrients that we need to apply, even on our pasture. We have it soil tested to see how much nitrogen to make the grass grow green and fast. If it has too much of one nutrient, we don't waste money by buying something we don't need. So soil testing is a practice that we commonly do. In our other farm practices, we use what's called no-till. We have a lot of rolling hills here for our crops. So we leave the residue. What that means is we leave the residue from the previous year's crops on the field. Rotate a different crop each year, and that helps hold the soil in place, conserves moisture under really drouthy or dry conditions, and it just makes for a healthier crop. So if we raise a healthy crop of grain, that's more healthy for our cattle.
It's a pretty nasty wind over there, but we'll keep going here. So one of the questions we have is about the size of your operation and profitability. So just because you're a little bit smaller, does that mean you're less profitable? Maybe talk about that relationship.
Well, okay. Yeah, our operation is about 500 acres, and by a lot of farms, particularly in Fayette County, that's not a large operation for corn and soybean crops. And one way that we've been able to maintain profitability is we have to keep our costs down. Our debt load is low because we're not making payments on a lot of expensive land. So the land that we have purchased and bought in recent years is we were able to buy at a reasonable price to keep our costs down and keep our interest rates are low. So that helps a lot. We're diversified because of the cattle operation. We can market some of our grain through the cattle that we feed out the market weight. So that helps spread our risk. Another thing too is I have not been a full-time farmer except for maybe 5 or 6 years, because I was a high school agriculture teacher for over 30 years. And during that time, we farmed about the same size operation we do now. Just now we get to devote more time to it. And we have had off-farm income to supplement our salary and our gross receipts over the years.
Oh, very good. So we got about 5 minutes left, guys. So if you have any last-minute questions, now let's go time for those. One question that Miami Trace did have is, are consumers eating as much beef today as they have in the past? And I can probably help you with this one, Craig. And I can tell you that no matter, it doesn't matter how many head of cattle we raise, people are going to eat it all. So we have a smaller cow herd than we did in previous years. Through a drought period there in about 2013, 2014, but that herd size is growing back up. So as our herd shrinks and grows, so does consumption, not only here in the United States, but across the globe. So, Craig and all of our farmers out there are very, very efficient. We grow 25% of the global beef supply on only around 10% of the cattle herd of the world. So there's a ton of technologies and feed efficiencies, like we talked about earlier, that are making it so efficient. So last minute questions, guys. Let's get them in there. But maybe while we're waiting on that last one, let's pan around and kind of see. You know, we talked about the barn and some of the equipment. Let's maybe do that.
You kind of see as the mother cow herd has they've had a little hay to eat. Take a look at how most of them now have settled down. They would be very content just to stay that way the rest of the afternoon. Nice cool day. For them, it's light breeze. And I was asked yesterday about how much shelter we have in the winter. So I mentioned the barn was built in the 1830s, and we've updated it and upgraded it with metal siding and a new roof and all that. But the size and shape is just as it was. The stone foundation is just as it was built in the 1800s. But we're lucky that it has enough room downstairs that we're able to get equipment in to clean out the cattle manure when we have to. And it's nice and warm. It's being a bank barn on the coldest of cold winter days. They may still be outside and grazing, doing their cow thing, but at night they will come in and settle into the barn, and they get a little closer together. Obviously, they share body heat with each other, and it collects in that area. But also, as we get them dry, keep them cow dry, out of the wind, they still need fresh air. So a common misconception with people that have animals in the winter, they think they have to close them into a really small, tight area, and that is not always the best thing for that animal, because it's moisture, and it's as it breathes, it can create a respiratory problem for the animal. They do need fresh air, some good ventilation. So we leave things open enough. A cow is smart enough to know when it needs to go inside, it'll do it. We leave them alone.
Oh, very good. Well, guys, we are at time here at 12:15. We'll go around. We'll open your guys' mics up and join me in thanking Craig for having us out there today. It's a little windy, but no matter what the conditions, we got to be out there taking care of our cattle. So, all right, guys, we will sign off here. And Minerva High School, if you guys want to thank Craig, we got your mics open.
Thank you, Craig.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And then Miami Trace, it looks like we had a couple sneak out.
Well, my class period ended before the tour, but I'll show them the minutes that they missed, and we enjoyed